All right, here we are. Another week at Liberal Currents Live, where we talk about the fate of the nation, the fate of the world, the fate of the universe, and
I
also
don't
about,
not
and
really
also,
the fate of the
no,
universe.
no, not so much. We also talk about like Natalie Harp and political gossip things as well, which are on the same scale, I think, of existential need. Uh, so if you are one of our paid subscribers, which if you're not, you should be at liberalcurrents.com/subscribe. You may go to the Discord now at Liberal Currents Live, the Liberal Currents Live channel, and ask us questions, which we will prioritize. If we do not get questions in the Discord, or we've answered all of them, we will also answer questions on Twitch and YouTube. So please hit us with your questions. But before that, Natalie Harp.
Natalie Harp. I mean, I love it because like we've had a lot of scheming vizier stories. Now we're like maybe it's an imperial concubine story, uh, which they sound kind of like goofy tropes. Uh, but it's always nice to discover that like your goofy trope has a certain backing in political science. Um, and like I mean, Adam, you've done a lot of reading about this, about how these kinds of structures like are actually totally characteristic of personalist styles of government.
Yes. I mean, every fun dictatorship that is, entertaining to talk about is personalist, right? Like I mean, I know Woody Allen, he's a terrible person, but it's like the scene in Bananas where the guy had been just an ordinary revolutionary vision, and he walks out and he's like, from now on, everyone will wear their underwear on the outside, to make sure that they're wearing the appropriate underwear, like that we can all see, like just like crazy stuff like that. But of course, if it's personalists, then personal relationships with the personalist are key. And yeah, that's where you get the vizier, tropes, because the closest advisor is potentially the closest source of influence. Uh,
Yeah, I mean,
Toby's,
we saw this, like, this
yeah,
happened in like, pour one out, right, for Yevgeny Prigozhin. Like, still wondering why he didn't go all the way, but, like, who is Yevgeny Prigozhin? Well, he was running, like, bloody, like, shadow wars in Africa, and then also prison battalions in Ukraine, and, like, who was he? Was he, like, a general? Did he work as... No, he was a cook. He's, like, Putin's caterer.
he wasn't even a cook, right? He was like a vendor. Yeah,
Yeah, he's like he's Putin's food vendor to the Kremlin, but somehow like just kind of like it becomes buddies with Putin, and in like these personalist regimes, like access to the leader is the most important currency in the country, and he had some of it, and then suddenly he was like a warlord or something. And now we've got Natalie Harp, who it turns out controls access to the president, and also is like feeding him a steady diet of slop, and then also like has the keys to his like Truth Social account. So like some of that might just be her posting, or her responding to foreign leaders
so
on
I think
Truth Social.
at this moment in time, given both the president's age and the use of slang, you have to be very specific about what you mean by her feeding him slop. Like, is that actually his diet? Are we talking about media? Like, what is it? Like, what are we? What are we? Because I believe it all.
Media.
Okay.
Like she produces for him a steady diet of the news he wants to hear, which is about how much everybody loves him and about how cool and buff and strong he is and how everything's great. And he likes that, he really enjoys that, and she produces that content for him kind of religiously.
Toby or Guillaume, do either of you folks have thoughts on this whole thing? I don't know if you paid any attention to it. If not,
yeah,
sorry, go on.
It's been a puzzling saga, which is still being investigated by journalists, and in order to kind of get a proper scope of everything that is involved in this particular relationship. But it just adds another layer of just disbelief when it comes to the extent to which the presidency and also this ideology that is very much firmly attached to this president is bizarre. I mean, it's just, there's no other way of representing what is going on. The dynamics that have been at play within the administration since 2016 have just been just abnormal from the very beginning. So when imagining what will come after the Trump presidency, it will be a lot of going back to basics and trying to reestablish norms of conducts and behaviors that have been totally not only violated, but also disfigured to such an extent that you have to go back and try and establish some guidelines for future interaction. And another part of it is just, again, we're talking about media. The media has changed the game in terms of how presidents are supposed to conduct themselves as well. And so I think that's another layer of, okay, so many people, so many leaders now want to communicate with supporters, with the public through this medium. New rules will have to be in place to deal with things like corruptions and faux pas and ways in which this creates all kinds of problems. So it's very interesting for someone who maybe is an outsider. If you're in Canada or in the UK, it has a certain almost cinematic curiosity to it. But if you're an American, I can imagine it's not funny at all. That's your country and that's your president.
It's a little funny.
So,
Depressing, but a little funny. Yeah, we have a question from the Discord. Panoptica notes, didn't DeSantis's wife get into this territory? Casey DeSantis in the primary and also her charity. I don't 100% know the answer to that question. I haven't followed DeSantis's political career that closely. I think it's, I mean, we have, what is it, Lindsey Graham's sister running for his Senate seat right now. And she seems to know literally nothing about anything. So that's impressive. I do want to distinguish, I think there is actually a difference between like the wife in politics and like this level of like scheming vizier shit going on. A lot of people will rely on their partner. And like, you know, it's not great if like you have, you know, the Hex's wife like running shit in the Secretary of Defense or whatever. I'm less up in arms about it. If it's like some political campaign, it's like, okay, whatever. But it's when it starts to move into these like into the holes of like actual power, and it's not, and it is just like these random sycophants with no what is Natalie Harp? She was like a TV newscaster, right? She doesn't know anything about the machinery of government or the conduct of foreign policy or any technical expertise. Right? She's just there to like fluff Trump's ego, and by all accounts, she's pretty good at it.
I mean, listen, to be fair, neither does Pete Hegseth.
Who was also a TV personality. Yeah. That's important.
Yeah. I do want to take a different one angle on this, because I haven't dug into the details of the relationship particularly. But one thing that really interests me is we're talking about this because John Ossoff talked about it. And that's like, as someone who pays a lot of attention to what actually lands in politics and specifically in media cycles, that's very fascinating to me. He's done a couple of things lately, none of this scale. This is the biggest one by far, where he's taken shots and they've really landed. He is showing very good instincts for someone who's a presidential hopeful. And that aside, it's always just kind of fascinating to ask the question, why this one? There's so much crazy stuff. There's so much evil stuff, but this is the one that really has everyone going, huh? And also has a lot of people on the MAGA side going, hey now, and giving like defensive reactions.
Well, I think part of it is like you can listen to the speech where he brings this up, and he is not trying to like make an argument in a way that like someone like me would try to make an argument. Yeah. He just tosses this off
Yeah.
about like, oh yeah, Trump would rather hide on the plane with Natalie, and he doesn't elaborate. He doesn't say any. He just moves on from there, right? And so like, yeah, like he took a shot at Trump, like very clearly, but it wasn't like, I'm gonna make a speech about the perils of personalism. It's just a shot, and then they responded.
That
Right?
is
It
what I
got under
sound
their
like.
skin, and like I think that's just part of the game, in like a very real sense of like the game. Like a contest is like you just kind of take little shots and you see how the opponent responds, and like
Yeah.
when it stirs some shit up like this, when it
Yeah.
produces a reaction, when it drives a media cycle, that's when you lean into it.
Yeah, probably John Ossoff, when he was thinking up the statement with his staff, they were not thinking that one, like just like you said, passing remark was going to be the story. That if they drove any story at all, that would be the story that was driven by it.
It does make you think, though. I think your point's a really good one, Sam. Like, people like us probably wouldn't be very good politicians because you're not actually making an argument, you know? Like, because it was just a jab, wasn't it? It's just a jab.
Yeah.
Like, it might land, it might not. You're just taking a little crack. And, like, the goal there was, let's just get this in the news cycle. And they did. Credit. But you don't need to make an intellectual, substantive case about personalism or something. We can come along after and sort of talk that up. I'm reminded of, you remember when Manchin finally got behind the green energy bill?
Yes.
And it's like we've been trying to get him on board for like ever. And this is our guy who supposedly can actually speak to the Fox News base, and seeing him on Fox News defending it was incredible because of the just nonsense he talked. And just to have his like big smooth brain going full power for our side was incredible. And like there was this Fox News anchor being like, well, but why will this reduce inflation? And to be fair, she has a point. It's nothing to do with inflation. This is just and Manchin just makes this hurt little puppy face and goes, why don't you want America to succeed? And I've got to admit, it would never have occurred to me to give that. And then she starts getting really angry and wound up. And every time, no matter what he said, he's just like, I don't understand why you don't like America. And it's like, you know, like, okay, but he's won West Virginia. Like, he's whatever is going on in that guy's head, he's connecting with something. And there's
I actually
like that.
I
would have thought to say it that way, but it landed.
Yeah, for sure. I actually want to address this one, even though because it's connecting to something I'm thinking as you're saying this. So in on YouTube, Tracy Harm's comments, precisely, I wouldn't make a good politician because I want to think better, not score points. But what I will say is that remark specifically is trying to score a point. And if you are in social media, like you know, we all come from the swamps of social media. We all, like, at some point we're just reply guys before, you know, we had a platform or something. And as a reply guy, I actually would try and make an argument. Like I would try and argue someone to death because I actually like cared about the questions and stuff. But what I came to understand as I became, as liberal currents grew and I came closer to public figure status than random reply guy status, I realized that like that's really a losing game. To actually argue that way, unless you actually have a specific person you are talking to and having a real conversation with, in which case it's not really like arguing. It's like trying to come to an understanding together, really. But unless you have someone like that you're dealing with and ignoring everyone else, mostly it's like the moment you're trying to actually like rationalize, you lose. It really is about like making one statement that lands and makes the other side look weak by comparison, frankly. And either so, and the two options that you have are either to try that and hope you succeed, or to ignore. And either and the middle path of like, well, no way, let me just talk to you about this because like the details here are more complex than like on social media, especially if you're in a situation where you've drawn a large amount of attention and you're getting a lot of replies, that's just a loser's game. There may be there'll be a subset of people you can do that with, and that ends up being actually very fruitful. And that's how I've met many of the people in the liberal currents community, in fact. But like for the lion's share of replies, it's going to be a like plant your one flag and hope that it sticks, or you know, is a good one. Or just walk away. Just mute the thread and walk away. And that's how politics is actually. Like once you get to the scale of a senator from a a national figure, what else can you do really? Yeah.
To me, this speaks to the way to how there's kind of a skill and an art to this business.
Yeah.
Where I think at least some politicians kind of want to approach this as like, I need to get the right answer, and I'm going to get it from my focus groups and from my A/B testing, and they'll deliver to me the optimal message, and I will read the optimal message to the camera, and it'll work. And like, I think mostly it has not worked. That at least in that form, when you can just tell somebody's reading from a script. Whereas, like I've said this before, like part of Trump's skill is media background, right? All the time he spent on broadcast TV and like doing reality TV specifically, where it was all of, like you had to be delivering these lines, you had to be delivering these clips. If you weren't funny, if you weren't compelling on screen, they weren't going to show you. Right. So it's this very competitive environment that he very clearly thrived in. And I think you see a lot of our more effective politicians today, like they themselves have to be out there, like in the trenches, like coming up with their own lines and like doing their own media and like kind of facing the music, facing the public and getting a reaction or not getting a reaction. Right, whether that's like in person and you can like measure the crowd, or whether that's like online and you're looking at your clicks or whatever, right? I think the ones like Ossoff, like AOC, like Mamdani are like clearly kind of managing their own presence, and like I think is working for them.
Do we have any more questions? Doesn't look like it yet. The Mamdani thing is very interesting as a New Yorker, as the New Yorker here in this group. So there was a slate of we have very old water fountains in Prospect Park here in Brooklyn, and there was a slate of robberies where they would steal the brass plates from the water fountains, and that would make them not work anymore. And lots of people reported this through the channels you're supposed to report it. My wife worked very hard to. Oh, hey, Ryan joining us.
How's it going?
Going good. Just talking about political communication, mostly because of Ossoff's, big
political communication in the form of stealing water fountains, which I'm
getting there. I'm getting there. Okay, all these brass plates in New York got stolen. Water fountains don't work. People like my wife reporting this to the proper authorities, both our member of the city council and the Prospect Park Alliance, and all of them are like, yeah, we know about it, and nothing happens. People start tagging Mamdani on social media about it. Everyone they see that's broken, and he does this big, he shows the Instagram video of someone being like, "There's nothing there, it's not," and he's like walking up to the camera, and he's like, "I got you. Stay hydrated." And he shows the sped up video of the workers pulling out the old water fountain and putting in the new one and being like, "I'm on it." And of course, my wife is like, "Okay, that's one, but what's the actual rollout for the rest of the?" But he's out there actually both responding to people on social media and doing the visual persuasion of, "Oh yeah, we are functional. We're on top of it. We do the job." Still want to see how much of the job he actually does, because that's the issue, right? The thing I was always excited about him for is exactly what you said, Samantha, that it is a skill issue to do the communication as well as he does it. And I wanted someone like him in the Democratic Party so that others would see him as a model to emulate. Now, connecting that to good administration is very difficult. I actually think he's making a serious go of it. It's going to take years to know whether he was effective.
I think there's an additional element there, though, with Mamdani, is that he's got the trust of online progressives. He's clearly very skilled with social media, not detracting from that at all. He just does it very well. And he seems to enjoy doing it, which I think for a lot of politicians is clearly pulling teeth for them, but he seems to genuinely like it, which helps. I think it's also the thing that for whatever reason, and I could go into why I think this is, but for whatever reason, the people who are lefties who yell about politics online on Blue Sky like him. And they believe that he's authentic and that he's genuinely on their side. And you see this all the time with Mamdani, getting credit for stuff from sort of the online left, that a regular Democrat wouldn't get credit for.
That's true.
No matter how good their social media skills are. And a lot of people have been like, oh, he got credit for business deregulation. If like Kamala came out in favor of that, we'd hate it. Yeah, sure. But again, we believe he means it. He actually cares about ordinary people's lives and their affordability. And that's good. That's the third bit of like, okay, you've got to actually have good governance. It's got to be social media savvy, but also like the thing is like online lefties are not that many people. They're really not.
Yeah.
But they do have this kind of key like amplification function of we're going to pick up these videos and share them. And I have people in the UK who've never been to the US who say stuff like, oh, it seems like Mamdani's doing a really great job in New York. No, really, I've heard this a few times now. And that's not that they're going over like the details of New York's budget or something. It's the people they follow on social media and who are like credible authenticators for them have signed off on him.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that when you lose the online left, it's like not that many people and they're really loud and really annoying. But it's so great to have them on side because they have that function.
So you know, I'm going to polarize for a minute and maybe piss people off on a streaming thing because that's what you're supposed to do. Broadly going to speak of two groups. One is the Bernie dead-enders, and one is what I'll call the Democrat dead-enders, which is a much smaller group. The Bernie dead-enders, I think that's self-explanatory. But the Democrat dead-enders mostly exist on Blue Sky and nowhere else, and they are people that are just incandescently angry about the fact that Democrats don't get credit for things that they do, which is a problem, but also honestly, it's a skill issue on the Democrats' part too. I think. But so the example that they point to with Mamdani is Mamdani's meeting with Trump versus Gretchen Whitmer's meeting with Trump, and how actually objectively very similar in what they were attempting to do, but the first was treated as like an actual absolute betrayal. And the other was treated as like, wow, he's just so good at managing Trump.
Ryan, I mean, you make a great point. Like,
what was that? I didn't see that.
No, because there's this one photo where she's like in the room and she's like hiding her face behind a folder because she doesn't want to get her picture taken with Trump. Like, it's that I'm sorry, like, you gotta never show any fear.
Yes, that's true.
On the internet.
And it can't be half and half. That was what really killed her. It was the fact that she not only was she doing this, it's like she got duped. And so it's embarrassing in addition to feeling like a capitulation. I think some of that also was like right at the beginning of the term when the height was like the height of the anger was I mean, it was just incandescent rage. I don't think any politician would have gotten credit for meeting with Trump.
That's fair.
In that era. Yeah. I think Mamdani, not Mamdani. I think if, I don't know, who would be a good example of who, because Mamdani wasn't really like on that level at that time.
Well,
like if AOC went to the White House to try and talk to Trump, I think people would have been like on her. Like, I think people would have been mad.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
Anyway.
I mean, I think like,
but yeah, that was embarrassing.
I was just embarrassing. Yeah.
I think sorry, go ahead.
I think something that may be interesting as well is in terms of the media landscape and how things are changing. So for politicians and how they put themselves out there is, we talked about it's not simply about joviality, having the kind of personality that is vibrant like Mamdani, and people pick up on that. There's also being generally comfortable on a screen or on social media and stuff like that. And again, it's a kind of like a millennial Gen Z game where, people who grew up in that kind of technological sphere are more adept than, boomers and people who are on the verge of death. And so it's something that I think is just a generational skill thing. But I think Mamdani as well, as you say, Toby, has that kind of like backing from a kind of a youthful frustration with politics and people looking for something very different. And, kind of like the DSA movement and kind of that is part of that entire attempt to redirect the Democratic Party.
Your activists are the tip of the spear. You know, you
Right.
can't do without them. I mean, you may
Yeah.
not want them to run everything, but you can't do without them, right? They're the tip
Yeah.
of the spear. And if you lose the activist base, you know, you're losing an important part of politics.
We have this comment from Wiscoism in the Discord is extremely bad in general, though, that online tastemakers can decide who can be allowed to succeed and who can be discarded. And like, I mean, I'm kind of with you here, Ryan, that like this isn't even about the internet. This is like a general feature of social reality is that there's gonna be tastemakers, right? Like there's a book I really like by David Marks called Status and Culture. And he's like, this is just how all cultural diffusion works, is that like, there's like, whatever, there's like the very experimental crowd that's doing weird shit and like bubbling up with new ideas. But there's this kind of core line of like people who are cool, right? People who are influential, who have a platform. They might not necessarily be the ones developing new ideas themselves, but they are crucially important repeaters that connect like the actual leaders with the mass of people.
Have you ever seen the technology adoption curve thing? That's what this reminds me of.
Yeah, no, this is it. He talks about the technology adoption curve. There's one of like the cranky Austrian economists has some really angry essay about this phenomenon, right? Secondhand dealers in ideas. Right, Adam, you got to know this one.
I don't think I do. I mean, I'm very familiar with the diffusion of innovations.
Yeah,
as a general thing, but yeah.
Anyway, but like I just think it's like, yeah, this is just the weather, right? This is just life. Like you have to get these people on your side. You got to win them over. They're a core part of like how you get your message out there. You can see the exact same thing happening on the Republican side, where on their side, right, it's like the mid-level people are like, you know, whack jobs like Candace Owen. But like she's still an important part of like how do you take Republican messaging and push it out to a much larger audience.
I don't know if this is the quote that you were talking about. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh no, there's a famous quote from Milton Friedman where he says something similar about how he believes the basic function of like people like him is to develop alternatives to existing policies to keep them alive and available until the politically impossible becomes the politically inevitable. So that's what he thought his role was in politics.
Sorry I'm late.
You're good.
A little bit on
You're
color people time, but it's okay.
Go ahead. Sorry, I jumped in there.
Yeah, another thing as well, and maybe Toby, you might find this interesting, but The Economist had an investigation on the introduction of TV cameras and specifically social media of social media to parliamentary speech. And they found that the average number of words used during parliamentary speaking time in the British House and Commons had dropped from a high of like 1,000 average words in 1938 to a low of about like 460 words in 2024. So shrinking. But also in the US, there's scale Kincaid readability test, which is used to test for oratory sophistication, and they found that for President George Washington, he scored like 28.7 on the scale, which is quite good. And at the very lower end, surprise, Donald Trump managed to have like 9.4. Which is typically what is used for a very bright 7-year-old. And the thing that is quite interesting about that is this, again, this whole idea of oratory and oratory skill. I mean, the last great orator that the US had was really Obama, I think. And the question with Trump, you have this great degradation of oratory. And so you think of people like Ossoff, and I think to some extent as well Peter Buttigieg. I think both of them have the ability to speak in public, and they have a way of really kind of saying things that become viral because of the way it's been put. And so I think that's an oratory asset that is very important in like the age of social media that other people don't have and has been degraded because of the influence of Trump.
I really agree with that. I really like that.
I guess what I would say is slightly different from Samantha, and maybe to make Wiscoism feel a little better about the direction of our response is what you need to do is make use of the landscape. That doesn't necessarily always mean get every feature on your side. As we talk about a lot, sometimes even with getting even if it's one of your own factions, getting negative attention is better than getting no attention. And if it effectively pushes you personally as a candidate, say politically, or your agenda, or whatever it is, or the conversation about the thing you want people talking about, it's not. It doesn't always require winning over the online left, say, if we're talking about them or whomever it is. But you have to take them into consideration. Like one of the things the Biden administration tried to do was simply flat out ignore the press. That does not work. They're still going to exist. They're still going to write 100,000 articles about how they hate you in so many words.
You don't have to cater to them, but you have to respond to them.
You have to be able to use them, frankly.
Use them, respond to them, manipulate them, however, but you can't ignore them. Whether it's kind of around them, like kind of have your own media ecosystem for better or worse. And I say for better or worse because obviously with Trump, that can go down a negative path, but you can try to like get them on your side. You can try to go around them, like, in the talk directly to the people sense, but you can't ignore them. You can't act like just do things and they will and everybody will follow. Like look at what Zoran is doing in New York. The thing about what he's doing is very showy. Like he's delivering, he's basically doing like kind of an updated version of Deliverism, but it's very loud. It's very, hey, I am here helping making your life better. This is how I am making your life better. This is how government can work for you. And I think that's kind of the pose we need to adopt.
The interesting thing about Mamdani is, there's a lot of interesting things about Mamdani, but one of the interesting things about Mamdani to me is, at some level, there might be some things about his ideology that are incompatible with things that I believe. But in terms of how he actually governs, what is actually incompatible with like liberalism? Like nothing, really. I mean, if you really want to stretch it, you might say the state-owned grocery stores or whatever. But it's not like that is so beyond the pale that it's like, anyway, that this is an argument that's been made 100 times before.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. Like we talk about deliverism, right? We talk about Biden, like the infrastructure or the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill, blah blah blah. All this giant shotgun of spending, CHIPS Act, all these new factories, and like we say he didn't message about it, but like he tried to, right? He would go to a factory opening and he'd like shake the hand of like all the union leaders who were there, and like they'd have some speech in front of some big machine or whatever. And the reason none of us remember any of this is because it's boring as hell. Like, I'm sorry, it's a very traditional kind of political pageantry. It's a kind of move that is like very familiar from like a kind of machine politics, a machine style of politics where like, yeah, you got to meet all the local bigwigs and like remember all their names and glad hand them all. But it is not a politics. It's not a spectacle that works for the social media age, right?
It's not really mass politics in the...
Right. And it's just, you contrast that with like this, like what Adam was talking about with like how Mamdani messages the water fountain, right? They don't have a ribbon cutting. They don't have him shaking the hand of like the union foreman or whatever. And like, they don't, oh no, we're not going to invite all the local media to like, let them get all their own clips. No, we're going to produce our own little video and it'll be fun to watch. That's important. You have to have people who actually watch this stuff, right? Because like fundamentally politics, political activism, you're not competing with other politicians. You're competing with everything else a person might be doing with their life, everything else they might be paying attention to, right? That's the environment that you actually have to succeed in.
Yeah,
I might not like the attention economy, but you have to compete in the attention economy.
Right. So, like, for example,
I would also say that the way that Biden did things, like in terms, even of the policy standpoints, we're talking, it's very rooted in this 70s, 80s, 90s idea of we need to open more factories. We need to build more infrastructure. Like, oh, I love it. I love me some infrastructure spending. I love me some that, but when we talk about who is affecting like directly and tangibly, I am not sure. I would say I was like strongly affected by anything like Biden did. The only thing that came close to affecting me was like the 2K student loan thing, which 20K student loan thing, which was overturned. But other than that, like we talk about deliverism, and like in many ways Biden did deliver, but he delivered in a way that was not legible to the average voter.
I think though that this comes back to my point about like having the trust of the comparatively small groups who will amplify that. Like a hypothetical I think about a lot is if Bernie had won the 2020 primary and won the 2020 election and implemented the same agenda and stalled at the same points, had tried to do student loan forgiveness and the court had overturned it, how different would the reaction to that have been? And I think the only on it surely vary, right? And let's just say had the same slightly off-key, janky 70s messaging. Just like carbon copy of the Biden presidency, but Bernie was the front man. I think people online would have been way more excited by it. Way more. And
Absolutely.
people would be saying, ordinary people would be saying,
At least he tried.
I feel like President Bernie's doing stuff for me. But on the converse, you would also have even more fear-mongering from the mainstream press. You would have even more of like, whoa, the America I know is this communism or something? And then you'd have idiots in Florida being like, man, I feel like it's communism on one side and fascism on the other. I don't know which one would be better or worse, but we trade one set of problems for another.
Yeah, for sure.
And the only variable that would change is which of these sorts of mid-level groups trust the figurehead.
Yeah. So first I want to say in the Discord, Josh says, we are in the age of the parasocial politician as the apex predator of politics. And one thing that I say a lot is we can understand media strategy through the lens of classical rhetoric better than through kind of like the market research approach that a lot of politicians take that Samantha was kind of alluding to earlier, that's more quantified. Not that that's not useful. But in classical rhetoric, there's logos, the reasoning, there's pathos, the emotional aspect that I think no one discounts. But the one that I think everyone discounts the most is ethos, which is not actually the character of the person, but the character as understood by the audience. Actually having trust with your audience is the scarcest resource. More scarce than attention is trust with some audience right now. So if you can get that, it doesn't have to be the online left, but you have to have your people that can amplify you, whoever they are. And you have to have trust with them. And like Sarah McBride, I actually had the opportunity to talk about this with Sarah McBride, the first trans representative of Congress, and she expressed frustration in that, like, she feels that as soon as she does anything, she does not actually have the trust of people that she hoped that she would have trust with to be looking out for their best interests. Immediately, there's a huge, like, she's just throwing us under the bus kind of attitude that she gets. And it's just really hard. Trust is a very elusive thing. And Mamdani does a lot right. He does have skills, but I think you all are also right that there's very contingent reasons that have not a lot to do with just his skill set for why he has trust in a particular group. And that is a big part of his success too. I agree.
I guess my question for the group then, this is just something I've thought about a lot, is I think you have a lack of trust between like the mid-level people and party leadership. And it's not just the Bernie dead enders. I've done interview pieces with different sections of the Democratic primary base, and there is a feeling that they aren't fighting. And it's a difficult one to combat because it's at least partly accurate.
Yeah.
But I do wonder because in the Obama era, the Republican mid-level people didn't trust their leadership, and they do now. And you can tell. And it is so like fighting with one hand behind our back that the activist mid-level doesn't trust the leadership. Because like when Mandami meets with Trump, you want leaders to have that kind of flexibility and be able to take risks and be able to kind of just roll the dice, and the base will trust that at least they mean it and their heart's in the right place. And we don't have that. It's not just the burning left. There's all sorts of sections that are just like Chuck Schumer, I don't know, man, you know. And I guess, like, so how do we just have to make Mandami like head of the party, whatever that means, or like
the leadership has to indicate that they have beliefs in their heart. No offense to some of them, but I think you know, obviously that's a little mean, but like, if you're constantly talking about how your guiding star, I mean, more damage has been done to Chuck Schumer's reputation by that really old clip of him talking about how, you know, for every voter we lose in this area, we're going to pick up 2 in that area. You know, talking about anything through that kind of like calculated approach, it just makes people feel like you're going to sell them out. Even if it's not true, I'm certain that Chuck Schumer has some, you know, lovely liberal values, but whenever he talks like that, it makes people feel insecure in their position in the coalition, because if the impression that you get is that if you are on the losing side of an issue, you know, leadership is not going to have your back. You know, you're not going to have their back. That's my opinion.
And I think it gets into 2 things. First off, and I think that actually I haven't watched your video, like the whole "Are liberals out of ideas?" I need to watch that. But the issue is that there is a real question as to what exactly does the quote unquote liberal establishment believe in? What are they willing to fight for? And secondly, there is this perception that you know, the whole imaginary friends in Chuck Schumer's head, that imaginary moderate family, like
the Baileys.
Yes, the Baileys. Basically, there's this sense that the party is chasing like something like that instead of fighting for the people that the party is supposed to be for, and that breeds that mistrust, and that mistrust breeds the more conspiratorial thinking. So, like, while a lot of it is like, you know, social media, the phones, and whatever, it also is the weakness of the party as an institution that can channel these feelings, that can address these feelings, that can make people feel heard and represented.
So I've actually been thinking about this almost from like an authorial perspective these days, that like, let's say you're writing a book, and like on some level you need your readers to trust you, right? Because they're going to feel some emotions that they're not going to enjoy, right? They're like, bad things are going to happen to these characters that they're in love with, or events in the plot are going to come along and surprise them. And you need the reader to stick with you. You need the reader to be like, no, but seriously, stick with me. This is all going to be worth it. This weird tangent we're going on, it's going to pay off. I promise, like, it's all coming together. But then there's this kind of like bad emotion that you can feel as an author, where it's like, shut up, reader, and trust me. Like, I just need you to read like the first 500 pages of my book, and then you'll get it. Once you get to page 500, you'll start to really get it. But like, just trust me. And it's like, that's not a productive feeling, right? You actually do have to do the work to earn your reader's trust, right? And you have to do that like starting from the jump, right? Starting from the first sentence, you need to start demonstrating to them that you're somebody worth trusting. And I think that's like what you need in a politician, right? Is like on some level, like, yeah, you do need to get, like, you need the public's trust. It's good when the public trusts you. Your public should have like an attitude of like being willing to trust leadership, but then leadership has to be trustworthy, and they have to earn that trust as well, right? The bargain has to go both ways.
The thing about trust,
of course, there's just the basic issue that the party that is not in the White House does not actually have a leader. Like, there really is no leader of the Democratic Party, and chamber leaders of Congress are not really leaders, and it's unfortunate that they kind of become pseudo leaders when the party is out of the White House, because that's not their function. That's not the kind of accountability model that they have. It's just not the same. And it's sort of an inherent problem to make Chuck Schumer the face of the party. Chuck Schumer is barely able to do the job of Senate chamber leader. He definitely cannot be national party leader. He's terrible at it. Let's run through a few questions, and before we move to one question that is for Toby, shifting topics. So Panopticon makes a comment about villain narratives, which kind of goes along with what you're saying, Samantha, for like narratively. He says Bernie refuses to villainize SCOTUS. Essentially, stories need villains. And if you don't get it, give one, you sort of become one. And he points to Harris's anti-price gouging rhetoric as useful to that end. There's a lot of discussion of sort of lackluster, high-profile Democrats like Gillibrand, who cared more about keeping Mondami out than like doing well politically, essentially, and also said some racist things, which I don't know if people recall. But yes, the question from KDP Sud to Toby is, how is Andy Burnham's first month going as PM?
Okay, so quick catch up.
Let's find out if Andy Burnham has the trust of the UK activist base here in the person of Toby.
Yeah. Oh God, how much do you want me to talk? I'll try and do a vote. So recap last season on British politics. We elected a guy called Starmer. No one, and I mean really no one, liked him. And despite winning 2/3 of the seats in the House of Commons, he's recently been ditched by his own party. So this would be equivalent to like Biden being forced out after the midterms or something. Like, imagine the midterms were that bad. Burnham is generally seen as a progressive alternative to Starmer, what we call the soft left. There is some stuff to like here. He is a lifelong advocate of electoral reform, and that hasn't gone away. He's maintained that going into office. His big thing is he wants to decentralize the UK because we don't have federalism at all. Everything goes through the Westminster government. He wants to devolve power more. This is by no means bad. I also, though, think that the main problems holding the UK back are at the national level, i.e. Brexit, our immigration setup, our deteriorating standing in the world. So while I'm by no means against devolving power, the ways, the structural things are national issues. My focus on the UK has been with regards to cultural issues, and I've particularly closely followed the immigration and asylum debate and the trans rights debate. Burnham is no better on either of those. He has backed Shabana Mahmood's profoundly illiberal reforms of the asylum system, and he has signed off on the EHRC Code of Practice, which is functionally quite an extreme bathroom ban. So he's said, now both of these sort of happened almost as he was coming into power, so it put him in a really weird position. But one has to think that if he didn't want these things to have happened, he could have done something about it, and he hasn't. He's fully signed off on, he's fully caved on both the immigration thing and the trans rights thing. Is this working for him? So Labour lost about more than 1/3 of its vote to the Greens. From what I'm seeing at the moment, that's kind of split down the middle. About half of that has come back, about half hasn't. So the LGBT community in the UK, particularly anyone who's politically active, they are just gone from Labour now. And the LGBT vote is going to be just a pillar of any modern centre-left party's electoral support. They're gone, and I don't think they're coming back. And I don't think you can. I don't know what argument you can make there that you need to come back to a party that's just implemented a bathroom ban. I don't see how that works.
Really? Oh, go on.
I think though there is a chunk of progressives who want to vote for Labour. That's their ancestral home. He has better vibes. He can do an interview without sounding like a malfunctioning AI in a person suit. And so they're giving him a chance. Will that last? I think unless he can deliver real material benefits to people, probably not. And I don't think he's going to be able to deliver real material benefits to people because the things that are holding the UK back economically would require renegotiation of the Brexit settlement, and nobody's up for that. So he's got a polling boost to the mid-20s, stratospheric heights here. But no, Starmer's Labour Party was polling at about 15%, so it is up. Will that last? I don't know. It is also an interesting time in that Reform, our far-right party that had been leading in the polls, has gone through a very rough patch recently. So there is an opening here. I don't know. If you ask me to put my chips on the table, I would say Burnham is a better frontman than Starmer. He is more charismatic. It's a low bar, but there it is. I think he's ruled out the things he would need to do to really make this work, but I don't know the future.
I have a question about this, if I can get in the queue at some point.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was listening to the Rest is Politics, which I'm not sure, what your opinion on them is, but anyway, one of them made an argument where they were saying that Starmer was kind of set up to fail by the British electoral system, almost, where like he sort of like you were saying, he got this huge majority, but it was on the back of like the fact that the vote was so divided, essentially. And so he was always dealing with like this sort of huge majority built on a sand foundation. I don't know, not to mix my metaphors too much, but I wonder what you make of that, and then I wonder what are the prospects maybe for voting reform in the UK. I assume whenever you're talking about voting reform in the UK, you mean some sort of proportional type system.
That was what I was going to ask too. So yeah.
Yeah, let me do the proportional one first because that's easier. Burnham says he supports it. He has also said, not unreasonably, I guess, that it would need a separate democratic mandate. So it would either need a referendum win or in the next general election to be held under existing rules, he would campaign on that and then implement it were he to win. So, I mean, the path is still fairly long, but it is there, whereas until recently it was just non-existent. So do I think this will happen anytime soon? Honestly, probably not, but the odds are way better than they were a year ago. That's the answer to that. Now, the way in which Starmer won, where he got 2/3 of the seat with 1/3 of the vote, puts him in a bit of a strange incentive position. I think we can overread that as like a reason for his failure. Like, yes, it puts him in a strange incentive position. At the same time, you have a 2/3 majority in a country that is functionally a legislative dictatorship. Parliament can override the Bill of Rights one day and the Magna Carta next, and it can do it with a plurality vote. Right? Like, if Starmer wanted to have governed differently, he could have done. Right? This isn't America where, like, some unappointed panel of theocrats masquerading as judges can just dip in on democracy anytime they want. No, we are the tyranny of the majority, baby, right? And look, what did Starmer do with power? That he radically reformed our immigration system, radically reduced the number of people coming into the country, made us radically more liberal on a number of fronts. I've concentrated principally on trans rights. And you can say, okay, he was in this weird position. You know what you could have done? You could have hung on to that third who voted for you the first time.
Hey, I mean, like, I think you're just right here. Like, Starmer wasn't in like an institutional prison. He was in a mind prison.
Yes.
Right. He was like, I'm sorry, it's just true. Like, he's handed this enormous majority, right? Not a small majority, an enormous majority, where you only need a bare majority to pass major changes. They don't have, like, there's no filibuster, there's no Supreme Court, there's no presidential veto, there's none of that. And like, he's just like, what do I need to do? I need to tack very hard conservative on like LGBTQ issues and immigration issues. And we are going to make major policy changes in order to do that. This isn't just messaging. We are going to change policy in a deep way. And economically, we're going to do nothing. as far as I can tell. Like
So
basically
I'm-
nothing.
The thing
And
with
like to-
economically, and this is where I get in a bit of a rant about, like, we had an article recently about, oh, why can't we do socialism without the woke? Britain is your answer to that question. Like, we can't do anything economically, even if we wanted to, because we do not have the money. Because we imposed sanctions on ourselves and it made us 10% poorer, right? Like, and like, this is the thing. If you want nice stuff like a national health system, even if that's a pre-existing legacy system, you still got to pay for it. These things aren't cheap. And, you know, and it's like Burnham, I think, really wants to be like, can we do some progressive economic stuff? Can we do deliverism? I think you'd have to revisit some of this core structural stuff. And because of what they have in their heads about you can never contradict the nativist right, they're not up for that.
I mean, like immigration is a
even
great
though Brexit is like
that
unpopular now, like
wokeism, or is that like a fundamental economic issue? And the answer is it's both, right? Your immigration system is a statement of your values, but it also has enormous impact on like basic material economic conditions of the country.
So
Yeah.
a few things I really want to like kind of emphasize for like for people who aren't familiar with how bad it is in terms of particularly trans rights in the UK and what Labour has done. I would consider what has happened in the UK worse than any red state. Any red state.
It's true.
No
It's just true.
red state mandates non-inclusion. Like the way they have interpreted that British guidance, that court guidance, is even if you want to let a trans person use the bathroom of their gender, you are not allowed to. Otherwise, Otherwise, it becomes sex discrimination. Like it is worse than any red state in the union. Like even the worst. So
right. It's not just bathrooms. It's anything gendered at all, right? Whether it's a youth
any
group,
any sex-based division, and this would include it would include toilets.
Your women's gardening club, right? You can't have a trans-inclusive women's gardening club in the UK,
right?
Whereas you can in Texas if you want to.
Exactly. You can have a queer bar in Texas. You can't have an inclusive queer bar in London. And I think people need to understand just how bad it is, because it is like several times as bad in the UK as it is in the worst American red states. It is, and we're talking. And red states are places that trans people are fleeing en masse.
The conservative British government issued a travel advisory about North Carolina and one other American state which escapes me, in 2016, when they passed bathroom bans that are actually less extreme than what a Labour government is now implementing. So we put out an official government warning saying don't travel to these places because of policies that are actually it's a really incredible the HRC Code of Practice for Equalities, it's called. It's a really incredible, and we are now, there's a sort of ranking of trans rights around the world, and we're now in the sort of Hungary, Russia sort of level.
Yeah.
We talked about this about the threat of this in the US, and like I understand there's good reasons why something like this would not happen in the US, but it's sort of like kind of like
a bellwether.
I'm very paranoid about this. Like this is very much is a long tail risk, but like it's basically like
But it's happened. I mean, we have this comment from Brandon Downey that I think is relevant. This has always been a mystery for me. Who is the constituency that Labour targets with this virulent anti-trans stuff? I get that there are various eccentric billionaires, wink, wink, willing to write checks. But like pre the policy, was there some big percent of the polity who is undergoing a trans panic? And like, as far as I know, the answer is no, right? No. This is primarily an elite panic, right? This is like the exact, like Toby, you've written about this for us, but like it's kind of bizarre and convoluted how they implement what turns out to be a very sweeping trans ban or whatever in the UK.
Yeah, so there's two questions there. One is sort of what was driving this and what were they responding to, and then the other is the mechanics of how the ban actually works. Which one did you want me to do?
I mean, take your pick.
In terms of what's driving this, the right-wing press, and actually, you know, a potential difference here with the UK is our purportedly liberal press has also not just sort of both sides it, but aggressive, like the Guardian has quite aggressively gone along with it. Now, you can overstate that. Like the Guardian's gone along with it, where American liberal media might not have done to the same degree, but this is the Times, this is the Telegraph, this is our campaigning right-wing press. A stat I always cite is in 2012, the UK press published a total of 60 articles that primarily focused on trans people. That had increased to 7,500 a decade later. Orders of magnitude increase. So at one point, the British press was publishing something like 30 or 40 articles a day on trans people. The overwhelming majority incredibly negative. And like as bad as the American media can be, these sorts of absolute panics tend to be sort of in the right-wing media ecosphere, on Fox News, whatever. The full British press just went into like bite and hold mode on this. And I think if I'm being honest about what happened, there is no constitution. Now, public opinion has changed because of that. We've gone from about 2/3 support trans inclusion to about 1/3. But this is not a voting issue. No one's top 10 list of issues. What's happened is every time when they were in opposition, a Labour minister was doing any interview, the interviewer would ask them, can a woman have a penis? Every interview, every single one. And they hated that question. And you could tell they hated that question. And they didn't have an answer for it. And it made them feel foolish. And they blamed trans people for that, not the journalists. That is honestly, I think, what happened. And they got to this point where they thought, if only they would fucking knock it off and just be normal like the rest of us, I wouldn't have to answer this question anymore. I think it's actually as dumb as that, why it happened. How it happened, essentially this is a matter of civil law, not criminal. So I guess if you want an upside, this is not a case of like a trans person uses a bathroom, you would be arrested. That's not the enforcement mechanism. The enforcement mechanism is if I own a bar in the UK and I allow trans people to use the toilet of their gender, I would then open myself up to being sued by an anti-trans group, of which there are many and are exceptionally well funded, and they love to sue people. And I would lose that case now. Well, interesting, because there's legal complications there, but that's the idea, that you'd be sued into enforcement. But then to flip that, maybe one of the things that's a bit perverse about this is the enforcement mechanism is bartenders and baristas and customer service people in every institution of the land. If you are a working class person in a service role, congratulations, you have now been conscripted into enforcing this, whether you like it or not, because you have to. And the Equalities Minister said when rolling this out, they said, if you see someone, and the way they phrased it was, if you see them using a toilet that does not match their biological identity, that was how they phrased it, please alert a member of the serving staff. So, and in a way, like, that's almost more frustrating in that you're outsourcing the discrimination, you're outsourcing the ugly conversations.
Now, this is very American.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To people who are like lower on the social privilege thing than you, and saying now it's all of your problem, but I'm a good middle class person and I'm not doing any of this myself. So that's how it works. And there is some confusion on that of like, oh, will we be arresting people for sort of toilet use in the UK? No, we won't. What will be happening is we will now be expecting our service staff to be bathroom police. And we will now be, I expect there will be a lot of lawsuits trying to force compliance on it, because some people, a lot of service providers have said we're not doing this. A lot of particularly green-led councils have said we're not implementing it. Some universities have said we're not implementing it. Because again, it's not only not criminal law, it's actually not even law. It's just advice on how to interpret the law.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think is fascinating. Oh, sorry. Adam.
I actually wanted to, in this incredibly terrible topic that is actually very morally important, I want to make the most boring point imaginable, which is exactly that Toby said correctly, that the UK is a legislative dictatorship in its legal structure. And often in America, we say, damn it, if only we didn't have federalism and the Supreme Court and the Constitution and the trifecta structure of legislation, then we could do things, God damn it. But here we are, and what happened in the UK was a court decision which an executive body decided to interpret a certain way and issue guidance on the basis of, and not the prime minister himself is nowhere to be seen. And I mean, he's like messaging on it, I guess, but like he's not actually doing things, right? And
Starmer jumped on a trans exclusionary interpretation of 4 Women in Scotland.
Okay, all right.
The first few days of it.
Okay, but it's like yeah, right. They didn't.
I just wanted to say, like, I what I'm struck by is like the weird backdoor way that this is passed, right? Like Brexit, that happens all out in the open. Yeah. Right, yeah. We're going to have a national referendum about it. The national referendum passes. Parliament's going to pass it. Major topic of national discussion, and it like proceeds in like the normal way. But it's like, as you've written for us, Toby, this one is like, well, they passed the Equality Act like 15 years ago, and or something like whatever, a decade ago. 2010, 16 years ago. And then a decade afterward, you have the court say, well, actually, although nobody knew it at the time, this is an act that actually bans trans people from bathrooms or something like, or like they make some ruling to the effect like that kind of like undermines the entire purpose of the act. So it's kind of a crazy ruling in my opinion. And then, like you say, and then there's like this interpretation of their guidance. Interpretation of the interpretation to be this national like ban, like extending it to all civil businesses. But it's not like, Labor got together and passed a trans ban through regular legislation. It's just like, this is just like cranking through the deep state. And then Labor is like, oh, I guess that's what's up now. We don't have any choice. Our hands are tied.
But this is exactly
goofy about it.
This is exactly it. We tend to think that the problem of the imperial president is because presidents are self-aggrandizing, but more than half the problem is that legislators do not want to take responsibility for things. What they want is to criticize executives for things, or at least to push responsibility to some other aspect of the system so that they can either take credit for something that is good or blame something that is bad, or hedge and take no stance whatsoever. And what Starmer was doing in that case was the last one, right? He was not saying, oh, well, we need to ban trans people from bathrooms.
No, he was.
Was he saying that? Okay, never mind. Never mind then.
No. Starmer's position is like, this is Starmer's position, as neatly as I can articulate it. When that ruling happened, now what 4 Women in Scotland actually didn't say is, it didn't mandate a bathroom ban. 4 Women in Scotland said that when the 2010 Equality Act says man or woman, it means, I'll just use their language, biological sex, right? That's what 4 Women in Scotland said. And 4 Women in Scotland explicitly says the implications of this for service use are unclear, right? Within a few days of saying that, 2 things happen. A body called the EHRC, which is one of these, constitutionally inferior to Parliament, puts out a statement saying this now means a bathroom ban. Starmer then says what this means is single-sex spaces are based on biological sex. He comes out and says that very early. And when asked about it, he says that is what the court decided. And when he goes further, he's asked, do you believe trans women are women? Which he's previously said that he does. He then says, no, the court decided otherwise. So it's not just, it's wild. Starmer's not a bystander in this.
I think we're actually agreeing here. Because yes, I agree. And this clearly was him changing his stance, right? But what it was not was during the election that he ran in, he said, we need to ban trans people from bathrooms. And then upon getting elected, he passed a law, that changed the situation because they believed that was the correct policy. What it was they changed their stance, but it was through the lens of, well, we're just following the law. And like you said, his answer wasn't, well, objectively, a man is a man and a man is and a woman is a woman. His answer was, well, the Supreme Court has now showed that according to British law, X, Y, and Z. So it's this deflection. It is a deflection of responsibility in many ways.
It's a circle of deferring responsibility,
right.
because the Supreme Court says we are just interpreting the 2010 Equality Act. The EHRC says we are just interpreting the Supreme Court ruling. The government says we are just following the EHRC. So it is a circle. The people, it's either saying, oh, well, this is what the law says, or this is what the interpretation of the law says. Now, in the British system, the buck stops with Parliament.
Yes.
Right? Like, if they wanted to legislate to change this, they could. Parliament could pass a law tomorrow revising the 2010 Equality Act to make it trans inclusive.
Yeah.
But it's everyone's just saying, oh, we're just doing what the person next to us says, and it's just a circle.
That's all I'm saying. There is an idea in American politics that if we simply had a parliamentary system and legislative supremacy, that politicians
would be better.
Right, politicians would actually do things. And I just want to emphasize that the UK has legislative supremacy and a parliamentary system, and they had 2/3 of the chamber, which they don't even need, to pass things. But that means that they could just have some subset of that to get a majority. They could alienate, half or almost half of their own seats to pass laws.
I think this kind of brings it back to some stuff we've been talking about through the whole show, really, about how, there are structural issues and there are structural problems, but there's also, if you got to be a leader, right? You actually have to do the business of, having values and exercising leadership, and somehow a lot of our leaders don't seem to want to.
I've got two things to say here. So the first is, if you're interested in a really old commentary on some of the things that were just talked about the British political system and the deferring of responsibility and the unclear nature of all that, you can read Thomas Paine's Rights of Man, where he talks about the British Constitution. So it's a very interesting little read there. The second, I'm curious, do we have any Canadians here? No one here is Canadian, right? Or has lived in Canada?
Guillaume's Canadian, but he's left us for now.
Oh, tragic. I should have asked earlier.
Oh, he's back.
I was
Speak
curious.
of a Canadian and he shall appear.
I was curious if you had any thoughts about what separated, or maybe what separates the unpopularity of Starmer versus the immense popularity of someone like Carney. Is it the variable of a Trump next door? Is that it?
It's definitely a very important factor. I mean, Canadians have a very strange relationship to United States, and I think the introduction of Trump and his focus on tariffs, which the Canadians experience as punitive, really created a lot of confusion at first, but then anger soon took over. And in some of our manufacturing sectors, like areas like Windsor, they went through a lot of destruction that were affecting direct pocketbooks of businesses and individuals. And so even people who were inclined to vote conservative wanted someone who would be able to engage with Trump skillfully. And the main contender for the Conservative Party did not seem to have that ability. Because Carney came from a banking background, he was kind of very worldly person that had some reputation for some of the work he did in the UK. A lot of Canadians just thought, this is our guy. to be able to do this. How much Canadians think he's been able to do that well is a different question right now. But yeah, I think the Trump factor was really the decisive, because for a long time before the previous federal election, everybody thought that the Conservatives had it in the bag, and that after the post-election surveys and all of the data showed very clearly that people were looking for exactly that kind of person. And it didn't help that the main contender, Poilievre, for the Conservative Party was known to have some sort of association with Trumpian rhetoric, like an attempt to present himself in that kind of style. And Canadians just didn't want that. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of a long answer to your question, but that is very much a right instinct. Trump had a lot to do with it.
Okay.
But to the UK point, sorry, I don't know how interested people are in UK politics, but you're gonna hear about it today. I think maybe the disanalogy with Starmer is Carney, and I'm not an expert on Canadian politics at all, but clearly positioned himself as like, I will stand up to Trump, right? And people, even though he's, my understanding is not like a hyper lefty or anything.
Well, yeah, this is the point that I was trying to make, right? Like because it's my understanding that Carney, like a lot, there's a lot of like people on the left who maybe even voted for him who were like, oh my gosh, this is, like I saw some meme, my friend JJ was very, he thought it, I think irritated him, but he also thought it was funny that people were saying like, oh, Carney's, just as right wing as Harper was, which is pretty ridiculous. But the idea that like, he's not this super left guy. Starmer at a very superficial level looks kind of like similar to a certain crowd, where he's like this sort of not incredibly left-wing guy, but it's like, sort of a managerial vibe. But the difference, I guess, that is sort of what I was getting at, is the fact that Carney had this external threat to rally against. And I don't know, maybe that's totally.
But you would think Starmer would too.
Believed in something.
A bit of a rally around the flag.
But you think Starmer would too. It's not like the UK didn't get hit with tariffs as well, right?
Starmer never had a moment where he got up and gave a speech and sort of defined himself against Trump.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, he just didn't do it.
He could have. He could have, but didn't.
And I guess
also Trump didn't talk about annexing the United Kingdom.
That's true.
Yeah,
right? Like that's got to be a part of this. That it was like very specific, like 51st state stuff from.
He didn't do Starmer that favor. Yes.
And then also the problems of the UK are very different than the problems of Canada. I mean, Canada, the UK just economically. I lived in UK. I did my high school in the UK. It was a very different world, economic world than now. I mean, looking at the way in which the UK economy has fallen is something to behold. I mean, I often tell my guys, look at what they did to my boy. It's a terrible desecration of the UK. And part of the reason why I think Starmer or even Burnham are going to have tremendous difficulties is because the challenges are just so enormous, and without dealing with the Brexit factor, fat chance of really kind of getting some motion going in terms of things like productivity. I mean, London, for example, for a long time has been the main economic driver. People are fleeing London to go to other places in the world for all kinds of reasons. And so again, it's just a different set of problems.
So
this is good. We're doing some comparative politics here. My professors would be proud.
I actually had to step out, but before I go, I just want to kind of make a note on basically like the open society in general, which immigration and trade are a part of. The open society, open immigration, open trade is just such a massive multiplier and massive accelerant for wealth. And it is just, it's so unbelievable how obvious this is. Like, there's no real argument against open immigration. There's no real argument against open trade. The only issues with these things is that oftentimes the economic benefits of these economic accelerants are not very well distributed. And I think that's what we need to address. But in terms of growing the economy, in terms of creating more wealth within a market economy or any economy, you just need that openness, that open society, open trade, open markets, freedom of speech, all that. And I think that's just kind of where we need to start from, because I see so many people like say, oh, we need to like concede on immigration. It's too unpopular. Like, no, we are not. No, actually, we are not going to advocate for basically like not just not picking up the $1 trillion bills on the ground, but setting them on fire because some racist assholes think we should.
All right. I mean, yeah, I mean, I basically agree with that. That like I feel like we're in this like race to the bottom century where it's like, yeah, this is like the great power competition of the 20th century is like to see who can stop hitting themselves over the head first. It's just a fun time to be alive. On that note, we have a comment from Mar in the Discord.
Actually, let me stay for this one.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I would like you to talk about Trump's Latin American policy, mostly the new government in Colombia. Which I have not been following the Colombian election that closely. My understanding is that the more right-wing candidate won, but I'm not 100% convinced that that was like Trump's doing. I don't know if this was Trump's finger on the scale. My very vague impression is that the Venezuelan refugee crisis had a very large impact on Colombian politics. In some ways, they may also have had an impact on American politics, but that they were facing, like, turns out, like some of the same kinds of nativist pressures, right? Where, like, from my understanding, like millions of people fled Venezuela. Where did they go? Colombia was like first port of call. Many of them stayed there, and this like just created more pressure for nativist policies.
I do want to say that when Democrats have control again, there has got to be some reckoning with Argentina about the money that was sent there specifically to help their damn incumbents win elections. And it's going to be the Latin America. I mean, listen, son of a Cuban here, like Latin American policy, has it ever not been a complete mess? But I mean, just the whole thing with Venezuela, what even is the path after Trump for what's been done there, right? Venezuela was a bad regime, is a bad regime, but now Trump has essentially turned it into our vassal state that does what we want. I mean, you know, I
think that's can be a little bit overstated.
Sure.
Like Rubio is apparently administering like Venezuela's oil revenue as like through his personal bank account or some shit like that.
That's Viceroy Rubio, thank you very much.
Viceroy Rubio, but like I am a little dubious about the extent to which Rodriguez is like actually under control.
Sure,
like,
no, I just meant the resource
people.
stuff. Yeah, I just meant the resource stuff. Totally agree. Yeah.
I wanted to something Silvaria said just a minute ago. I just have so much. I resonate with what you were saying earlier, especially the part about. I just have so much distaste for political commentators who make their whole thing talking about what's popular and what's not popular. I mean, what's the point of you? I mean, you could go work at the DCCC. You could do that. If I wanted to do that, I would go work at a campaign or at the DCCC. That is just at some level, not the entire point of talking about political ideas. And it's so frustrating to me that in the world of like the pundit mixed with the election analyst, mixed with the political movement leader, like you get all these things together. Anyway, that's sort of a rant, but
And that goes back to the trusting. And let me just get this in before I go. That goes back to the trusting. When you're in leadership, when you're like politics, when honestly liberalism itself is associated with this poll chasing, this quote unquote pragmatism in it at the expense of, hey, this is what we believe, this is why this is better for humanity, then that's what saps trust.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's just this kind of gravitational pull for professional pundits to start talking about horse race politics because it's easier, because you don't need to know anything about anything. Yeah, thanks so much for coming, Silvaria. See you around.
See ya.
Right, but it's just talking about people talking and like grinding your axe against some other online activist and being like, this poll proves that you're wrong, and like nothing ever lasts longer than 5 minutes, and like that's just easier. It's just easier to write that because you don't have any principles that you can get stuck on, and like you don't have to like think about society or history or any of that or policy. You just avoid all the hard questions and you just talk about people talking.
I mean, how differently would we feel about Matthew Iglesias if he just stuck with being 1 billion Americans guy? Like 1 billion Americans is a great idea. He had a great way of marketing it at the time. He like went and talked to everyone. He went on right-wing shows. He talked about it as a national greatness project. Like that was a great approach. Now it's just very obvious that like that was just his thing at the moment. He's moved on. Like and now he mostly focuses on like optimizing poll results and things. And even says like, well, yeah, birthright citizenship isn't even actually that popular, so it's probably constitutional, but if we could, we should get rid of it. It's just like, so how are we going to get to 1 billion Americans without birthright citizenship, Matthew? Come on, like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah. So
if he had stuck by, I mean, it's like the conversation between Ezra Klein and Ta-Nehisi Coates, like two different approaches, and frankly, I tend to give Ezra Klein a little easier time than many in our community.
I really like Ezra Klein. I always feel the need to clarify this. I really like Ezra Klein. I listen to like everything he puts out. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was not talking about Klein here.
Like,
no. Klein doesn't do the horse race shit. Klein wants to know about stuff.
But I do want to say that Ta-Nehisi Coates' basic position was, you are loyal to the truth and you are loyal to your principles, regardless of the way the political winds blow. And come 2029, if our political fortunes are different, who am I going to trust is really one of our guys. It's Ta-Nehisi Coates, because he did not blow with the winds, right? Like, I'm going to stick with him through tough times and good times, because he actually has principles. He's actually doing the work to try and find the truth, and actually like speak to it, regardless of how popular it is at a given moment.
Yeah, that's leadership right there.
Maybe, all right, let's see. Wait, actually, one last question that is terrible.
Yeah, for you specifically.
Okay,
any right-wing Cuban Americans. I can think of one right-wing Cuban American.
Katie B. Stud, Adam, have you heard from any right-wing Cuban Americans on what they think about how Trump's immigration policy has been affecting Cuban refugees who haven't been naturalized or gotten green cards yet? Unfortunately, I don't actually have a good answer for this one. The one Cuban American who might fit this description to which Samantha is alluding, I do not speak to about politics anymore. But the Cuban Americans I do speak to about politics are mostly liberal ones. So when we just call them cousins, so I'll just call her cousin, but she's like 90 years old. A cousin who is a humanitarian. She has been back to Cuba many, many, many times, because people don't realize one of the exceptions to the embargo was for humanitarian stuff. She would like bring medicine and help rebuild churches and things. So she's very closely connected with what's going on there. She's in Miami. She's very, very closely connected with the recently immigrated Cuban refugee population there, essentially. And she unequivocally thinks that this is all horrifying and bad, but she always thought Trump was horrifying and bad. So that's not really like a good bellwether for what the Miami community as a whole, as a voting whole, feels about the whole thing. I also am very curious about this.
I was in Florida not that long ago, actually. My wife's family are there. That's gone for us, right, for the foreseeable future.
Florida.
I don't know. Does anyone who maybe knows more about that from the we're not like Florida is a red state now.
I think unless it's yeah. I mean, what would I compare it to? You know, one of those states that like almost certainly will go red, but you could imagine.
Like
One could imagine.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I grew up in Virginia. Florida is like the reverse Virginia. Virginia was a red state, and then it was a purple state. And almost
This
as
is a
soon,
good example.
almost as quickly as it was a purple state, it was a blue state. Like
Yeah.
there was someone who had moved back to Virginia in like 2018 or something, or maybe it was 2020. And they were just like, oh, I'm just really excited to vote in Virginia because this like our votes matter here. And they're like, oh, you've
missed it.
You've not kept up, have you? Florida is the same, and the timing is later though. So Florida, obviously, everyone remembers, used to be the state, right? Like Florida elected George W. Bush with some help from the Supreme Court, and you know, again, they were pretty important in the Obama elections. But my read of the situation is a combination of there was a general trend towards old people moving there, obviously, and old has polarized Republican even more so than it used to. But also during COVID specifically, they were like a place that people went because they did not have lockdowns. Like, and DeSantis was like a very public opponent of Democratic state lockdowns. So after COVID, I feel like my understanding is it has been pretty solidly red the whole time.
Yeah.
To give some
so
people
also,
some. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I said another thing as well is just the stock boom in terms of the AI wealth effect. You know, basically nowadays there are two ways people are able to establish generational wealth. Either is inheritance, or it's through a stock boom like the one with AI. And with a lot of the AI boom, a lot of the reporting is showing that some of the people who are getting tremendous money through this AI boom are actually moving to Florida because of some of the tax system in that state, which makes a lot of sense. So much more concentration of wealth in the state of Florida. And with that will come a kind of sympathy towards any sort of Republican politics that is trying to preserve low taxes or no taxes in general. And so I think Toby is right that there is a shift towards red politics there, but also, you know, some of the younger kind of DSA members trying to make inroads in that state. And it's going to be interesting to see, because of the strong Cuban population in that area, the generational shift, because the older Cubans very much remember Castro and all of the tyranny and dictatorship. That's why I think it's kind of like a fumble for the DSA to post commemorations of Castro. That's not going to do well in Florida. But the younger generation, that maybe they heard it from the abuelas, and you know they kind of have some vague idea of who Castro is. But their mind's on other things like affordability and all these kind of issues. So there's a possibility that the younger generation might shift things in the future. So I think, Adam, you're right that, you know, yes, for now it seems very firmly Republican, but as generations change and people very much lose memory of the Cold War, I think you know, there's an opportunity for Democrats to kind of make inroads in that state.
To give people a little hope to go with this doom, a little bit of cope, I have to say I've talked to some people in the suburbs of Texas, and I think there's a little bit of worry about whether or not Tallarico's whole thing comes off as corny. I have to say, is not the response that I've seen. I think maybe we worry about it being corny. I don't know if that's how it's playing. I think it might be playing well.
I think if media commentators think it's corny, it probably plays well to normal people. I mean, like, let's just be honest. Like I don't trust anyone, any analyst who says it's corny. I'm like, you don't. What are you basing that on? Cringe wins. All right, one last thing before we go. Just very quickly, Panopticon asking about Florida's property insurance market. I mean, they essentially don't have property insurance, as I understand it. Like the insurers have pulled out, and that is because of climate reasons, mostly more than what you're referring to, the like condo oversupply things. And in the Reconstruction Papers, Moira Burse has a very good essay on an actual approach to the extremely difficult problem of this like risk mitigation under climate, which it's going to happen. Like it happened in Florida in terms of the insurance markets. It's going to happen in California next. They're on the way there. Yes, thank you, Guillaume. I love the slow motion. And it's going to come everywhere eventually because that's just climate change is happening. So Moira Burse, she talks about the trade-offs. It's a great essay. You should read it as well as the rest of the collection. I think I'm going to give it a wrap there. Thank you, Ryan, Toby, and Samantha for joining us, and Guillaume and Bavaria. Oh yeah, Trent. And Trent. Thank you, everyone.